Well, there were all those stories at the time. There's stories about almost everything.
Yeah, that's the
About
thing.
how you didn't get along, you had
No,
didn't
no,
like one another.
we didn't get along. We were.
Thank you for returning to our channel. Not only is Ringo Starr a talented drummer, but he is also a symbol of simplicity and humor in a world that is burdened by the pressures of fame. He is the heartbeat of the Beatles. The journey that Ringo took from being a weak and sickly boy growing up in Liverpool to performing on the most prestigious stages in the world is a demonstration of the power that can be harnessed through passion and perseverance. Throughout the entirety of his career, he served as the glue that kept the band together, a dependable friend in the midst of disagreements and disturbances. Despite this, there are mysteries that remain hidden behind the stage lights and legendary hits. At the age of 84, Ringo has finally broken his silence that spanned decades in order to disclose a shocking fact. It is possible that Yoko Ono played a much more significant role in the dissolution of the Beatles than we ever imagined. Is it possible that this is the last piece of the puzzle that will solve the mystery that has been surrounding the dissolution of the most iconic band in the history of the world? Let us take a step back in time and investigate the path that Ringo Starr took from being a typical young boy to becoming a worldwide music icon. We will also find out what he has to say about Yoko Ono's role in the unfortunate events that led to the dissolution of the Beatles and his early life. Richard Starkey, better known to the world as Ringo Starr, was born on July 7, 1940, in the working-class neighborhood of Dingle, Liverpool. He is best known for his contributions to the music industry. Ringo's early life may have appeared to be destined for happiness because he was born into a family that placed a high value on music and dancing. However, what transpired after that was anything but a fairy tale. In the past, his parents, Richard Starkey Sr. and Elsie Glee, had embraced a lively social life that was filled with swing music and ballroom dancing. However, all of that changed when their son, Richie, was born. The dynamic of the family underwent a significant change. In the meantime, Elsie became extremely protective of her son, while Big Richie, as his father was known, gradually drifted away from the family and began spending more time in pubs and less time with his family. Their lives quickly got out of hand, which ultimately resulted in their divorce and separation in the year 1944. After his father passed away, Ringo was left with only fragments of memories of him. He went through a series of difficult experiences, beginning with a near-death experience when he was only 6 years old. An appendectomy that was supposed to be a routine procedure turned out to be a nightmare for him because complications led to the development of peritonitis inside his abdomen. Because of his prolonged recovery, he was required to spend an entire year in the hospital, during which time he was separated from his family and fell behind in his academics. After Ringo had returned home, he was having a difficult time in school. He was experiencing feelings of disconnection from his classmates, and he was struggling with his own feelings of insecurity. But at the precise moment when it appeared that life had dealt him yet another cruel blow, something unexpected took place. Although he was in the hospital for a considerable amount of time, it was during this time that Ringo first became interested in drumming and began playing on anything he could find. A small spark, but one that would eventually ignite into a lifelong obsession. It was a spark that would eventually ignite. In an effort to keep the children entertained, the medical staff encouraged them to play music. Ringo took advantage of this opportunity and began tapping out rhythms with makeshift drumsticks, which would eventually become his escape from the harsh realities of his childhood. As luck would have it, he was brought back into long-term care in 1953 due to a bout of tuberculosis, and this time he was there for a period of 2 years. When Ringo was looking for solace, he once again turned to music. He immersed himself in the sound of drums, while other instruments were completely uninteresting to him. Even though his journey was not an easy one, the resiliency that he developed during these years would prove to be a defining characteristic of the individual who would later become the world's most famous band, the Beatles. Ringo had no desire to go back to school by the time he got back to his house because it had become a distant memory by that point. His mother remarried and attempted to rebuild their lives while he was playing along to music and banging on biscuit tins with sticks. Instead, he found joy in participating in these activities. His stepfather, Harry Graves, became a constant presence in Ringo's life. He was the one who introduced him to the world of big band music and taught him a lesson in kindness, which was a stark contrast to the surroundings he was surrounded by. In Ringo's neighborhood, there were a lot of small homes that were falling apart, and there was a lot of criminal activity. When you were there, you had to keep your head down and do everything you could to stay alive. Nevertheless, Ringo's enthusiasm for music only grew stronger despite the challenging environment in which he found himself. Despite the fact that he had a difficult time keeping jobs, whether it was as a waiter or a worker on a railway, his passion for rhythm remained unwavering. Furthermore, when he was finally able to secure a position as an apprentice in the field of machining, it was not the machines themselves that captivated his imagination. Rather, it was the music scene that started to flourish around him. And it was precisely in these seemingly insignificant moments that Ringo's destiny was being gradually written. Ringo's early life was marked by a series of challenges that prepared him for something that was much more significant than he could have ever imagined. These challenges ranged from him being a sickly child, tapping on hospital cabinets, to him being a young man discovering skiffle music and forming friendships that would forever shape his future. The fact that this young man from the rough streets of Liverpool would one day change the world, one beat at a time, was something that anyone could not have predicted. What influences did these early challenges have on the development of the individual who would go on to become famous as the drummer for the Beatles? As we continue to uncover the twists and turns that led to Ringo's extraordinary journey to stardom, we encourage you to keep watching. The beginning of one's career. It was during their lunch breaks at the manufacturing plant that Ringo Starr and his friend Roy Trafford would sneak down to a small club known as The Cellar in order to indulge in their passion for music. Trafford played the guitar while Ringo improvised, creating rhythms with whatever he could find, such as a box, a biscuit tin, or even the back of a chair. Trafford was inspired by the music of the Beatles. As time went on, their impromptu band attracted the attention of another neighbor and co-worker, guitarist Eddie Miles, and the two of them eventually came together to form the Eddie Miles Band. After some time, the band decided to change their name to Eddie Clayton and the Clayton Squares in order to pay homage to a well-known landmark in Liverpool. Rock Island Line and Walking Cane were among the lively songs that the trio played as they experimented with the currently popular skiffle trend. Ringo, who is known for his inventiveness, scraped a washboard with a thimble, which resulted in a beat that was uncomplicated but contagious. In addition, he had a natural love for dancing, just like his parents did, and he and Roy even took dance lessons together in order to hone their moves for nights out. On Christmas Day in 1957, however, Ringo's stepfather, Harry Graves, presented him with his very first drum kit. It was a pre-owned set that included a snare drum, a bass drum, and a makeshift cymbal that was fashioned from the lid of a garbage can. This was the moment that fundamentally altered the course of his career. It may have been simple, but it was all that Ringo required to jumpstart his journey towards becoming a master of the art of drumming. The Eddie Clayton Band's performances were elevated as a result of his newly discovered talent, which resulted in the band receiving additional gigs in and around Liverpool. However, as rock and roll from the United States began to spread throughout the United Kingdom, the skiffle wave began to quickly fade away. Ringo made a decision that would have a significant impact in November of 1959. After joining Al Caldwell's Texans, a band that was eager to make the transition from skiffle to rock and roll, he became a member of the band. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes was the name that the band ultimately decided to go with after attempting to adopt a number of different names, including the Raging Texans, Jetstorm and the Raging Texans, and others. Around this time, Richard Starkey officially changed his name to Ringo Starr. He was motivated to do so by the rings he wore and desired a stage name that had a country western flavor. Ringo's performances, which were referred to as Star Time, became an essential component of the Hurricanes' live performances. Beginning in the early 1960s, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes had steadily risen through the ranks to become one of the most popular bands in Liverpool. They were presented with an opportunity to reside at a Butlins holiday camp in Wales for a period of 3 months in May of that year, which proved to be their big break. In the beginning, Ringo was conflicted. In order to accept the job, he would have to give up his apprenticeship as a machinist, which had lasted for almost 5 years. However, Ringo chose to follow his heart, and the decision he made would alter the course of his life forever. The residency at Butlins opened the door to more significant opportunities, such as a tour in which they performed for the United States. There are Air Force bases in France. Even though the tour was filled with exciting experiences, Ringo later admitted that it was not as enjoyable as he had hoped it would be. This was due to the fact that tensions between the British and the French created an uncomfortable atmosphere. An offer to perform in Hamburg, Germany was initially turned down by the Hurricanes because they were so focused on their commitment to Butlins. This was due to the fact that they were riding high. In spite of this, they eventually changed their minds, which resulted in a series of events that were destined to happen. At the Kaiserkeller Club in Hamburg, which was owned by Bruno Koschmider, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes arrived on October 1, 1960, to perform alongside the Beatles. Although the Beatles were still relatively unknown at the time, they were the opening act for the Hurricanes, who were the headliners of the show. Ringo and John Lennon, Paul McCartney and George Harrison were introduced to each other for the first time during this period. And on October 15, 1960, Ringo made his debut with the Beatles, playing drums on a recording of Summertime alongside the band and Lou Walters, Rory's lead singer. This was the first time that Ringo had ever seen the Beatles perform together. Not only did Ringo's appearances with the Beatles during their time in Hamburg attract the attention of musician Tony Sheridan, but he also performed with the Beatles on occasion. Because Sheridan was so taken aback by Ringo's one-of-a-kind style, he even made an attempt to entice him to leave the Hurricanes and join his own band. Ringo Starr's journey with the Beatles had just begun, and the rhythm of history was about to change for all time. At the time, nobody knew this, but it was about to happen, participating in the Beatles. Ringo Starr made a decision that would go on to change the course of his life in January 1962, when he decided to leave Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, a band that had brought him some fame but left him yearning for more. Ringo returned to the Hurricanes for what would be his final season at Butlins, after having played with Tony Sheridan for a short period of time in Hamburg. But everything changed on August 14th, when he got a call from none other than John Lennon, inviting him to become a member of the Beatles. This call was the call that changed everything. The devastating news was delivered to Pete Best, who was serving as the band's drummer at the time, by Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles, just 2 days later. "The boys want you out and Ringo in." In his memory, Best recalled being informed that the band simply felt that he did not belong in the band and that the producer, George Martin, was not pleased with his drumming. Ringo was prepared to take on the role that would alter the course of his life irrevocably, despite the fact that it was a devastating blow. However, Ringo's first performance with the Beatles took place on August 18, 1962, at a dance in Port Sunlight. However, the experience was not without its challenges. The very next day, Pete Best's enraged fans staged a furious demonstration at the legendary Cavern Club. They chanted "Pete forever, Ringo never" outside of the venue and even at Best's home. Because of the intensity of the backlash, George Harrison was punched by a fan who was becoming angry, and Epstein was forced to hire a bodyguard to protect Ringo Starr. Ringo's destiny was predetermined, despite the tough beginning he had. Once again, he was a member of the Fab Four. On September 4, 1962, Ringo participated in his first recording session with the Beatles. However, the session did not go according to plan. Although George Martin, the band's producer, had doubts about Ringo's capabilities, he famously brought in Andy White, the band's session drummer, for their subsequent session on September 11th to include him in the recording of their debut single, "Love Me Do." Due to the fact that Ringo was only allowed to play the tambourine, there were concerns that his time spent with the Beatles would be cut short shortly. In a later statement, Ringo admitted, "I thought that was the end. It seemed to me that they were trying to pull a Pete Best on me." However, Martin quickly clarified that it was merely a precaution, and by November 1962, fans of the Beatles had completely accepted Ringo as a member of their own group. His confidence within the band skyrocketed as a result of the fact that some people even demanded that he sing. It didn't take long for Ringo to become more than just the drummer for the Beatles. He quickly became a well-liked figure in his own right. Fans from all over the United Kingdom were won over by his upbeat personality, and his contagious energy was on full display during their legendary performances. By 1963, Beatlemania had spread throughout the entirety of Britain, and the band's second single, titled "Please Please Me," had soared to the top of the charts. Their appearance on the television show Thank Your Lucky Stars was a watershed moment that cemented their position as the most popular band in the country. Ringo, with his charisma, quickly became a fan favorite, and before long, fans were wearing lapel pins that read, "I love Ringo." Meanwhile, songs such as "I Want to Kiss Ringo Goodbye" and "Ringo for President" were playing non-stop on the radio during this time. During the time that the Beatles were at the height of their popularity, Ringo took pleasure in his share of the spotlight and the party lifestyle that came along with fame. "I spent 3 years living in nightclubs," he recalled with fondness from his past. "It was a massive party that went on without interruption." He was frequently praised for his dancing abilities, which became a part of his charismatic appeal. In addition, Ringo's star power shone brightly when the Beatles traveled across the ocean in February 1964 to perform on The Ed Sullivan Show. Through the efforts of 73 million viewers, he was able to win the affection of the American people. Ringo later stated, "I was aware that I was well received in the United States. It was incredible to see all of the children waving for me during that time. We were just like any other group of boys, but we had succeeded." The popularity of Ringo continued to grow, particularly as a result of his spotlight moments during concerts, which were affectionately referred to as star time. During these moments, John Lennon would place a microphone in front of Ringo's drum kit, which would cause the audience to cheer heartily. It was his deadpan humor and natural charm that made him stand out in the first film that the Beatles ever made, which was titled A Hard Day's Night. Ringo's expressive abilities were brought to light in scenes that were crafted by director Richard Lester, and these scenes received praise from both critics and fans alike. In point of fact, some of the most amazing and unforgettable moments of Ringo's life were captured on film while he was still recuperating from a night of partying. Epstein described his quaintness as something that only served to further endear him to the general public. Disagreements and difficulties surfaced in spite of the extraordinary success. The Beatles were getting ready to embark on a world tour in 1964 when Ringo fell gravely ill with tonsillitis and pharyngitis. As a result, he was forced to miss 5 concerts while the band was on tour. He was terrified of the worst possible outcome, which was that he would be permanently replaced when session drummer Jimmy Nicole temporarily took his place. Although the pressure of Beatlemania was beginning to weigh heavily on all of them, Ringo was able to rejoin the band in Melbourne, which was a fortunate turn of events. During a performance in Montreal, Ringo was even subjected to a chilling death threat, which prompted him to position his cymbals in a vertical position for the purpose of providing protection during the show. Ringo received his first taste of lead vocals on a British #1 single when the Beatles released Revolver in 1966. The album featured the hit song Yellow Submarine, which was released during the chaos that was occurring at the time. On the other hand, by the time that year came to a close, the band had just about had enough of the non-stop touring schedule. Ringo reflected, "We made the decision to stop touring at the perfect moment. Any person would have been satisfied with 4 years of Beatlemania." Soon after, he relocated to Sunny Heights, a larger estate, and started concentrating on his drumming for the band's landmark album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Ringo admitted that, despite the album's success, he sometimes felt like he was nothing more than a session musician. This was due to the fact that Lennon and McCartney were gaining more control over the creative process. Ringo left the Beatles for a short period of time in 1968, while they were in the process of recording the White Album. This occurred as internal tensions within the band continued to simmer. Ringo retreated to Sardinia, where he found solace and wrote Octopus's Garden. He was infuriated by McCartney's controlling behavior, as well as the passive aggressiveness that existed between Lennon and Harrison. Harrison greeted him with open arms when he returned 2 weeks later, covering his drum kit and flowers as a peace offering. Harrison was happy to see him again. Despite this, the cracks were already visible, and the Let It Be sessions in 1969, which were plagued by problems, marked the beginning of the end for the Beatles. This was the final time that the Beatles recorded together at Abbey Road Studios, which took place on August 20th, 1969. After only a few weeks, John Lennon made a whispered announcement of his departure, and by the 10th of April in 1970, Paul McCartney had made it official that the Beatles were no longer together. However, what would happen to Ringo Starr in the aftermath of the most significant band breakup in the history of the world? Be sure to stay tuned to learn how he managed to navigate life after the Beatles retired. Ringo Starr's promising solo career. Following the dissolution of the Beatles, Ringo Starr emerged from his position behind the drum kit to establish a remarkable solo career. This demonstrated that he was much more than just the drummer for the band. Almost immediately, Starr made his mark on the charts with the infectious hit It Don't Come Easy, which was released in 1971. This song demonstrated Starr's ability to exist independently of other artists. He went on to achieve 2 singles that reached #1 in the United States, The Heartfelt Photograph, which was written in collaboration with George Harrison, and the playful You're 16, which further solidified his position as a solo artist in the spotlight. Back Off Boogaloo became one of his most successful solo releases in his home country of the United Kingdom, climbing all the way up to #2 on the charts. Ringo Starr's solo album, had already reached the top 10 in the United Kingdom by the year 1973, and the United States, a significant accomplishment that demonstrated that Starr was more than capable of thriving outside of the shadow cast by the Beatles. It was a major achievement. Furthermore, the album featured contributions from his former bandmates, which helped to bridge the gap between his musical journey in the past and his journey in the present. However, Ringo's talents were not limited to the realm of music. As a result of his participation in a number of documentaries and even hosting shows, he became a frequently seen figure on television. The role of narrator in the first 2 seasons of the children's series Thomas and Friends, in which his warm and distinctive voice became iconic for an entirely new generation of fans, is considered to be one of his most beloved roles. Additionally, he took on the role of Mr. Conductor in the children's show Shining Time Station of the Public Broadcasting Service, PBS, where he once again enchanted younger audiences with his charisma and sense of humor. Ringo continued to maintain a strong connection to his roots in live performance, even as his fame as a solo musician grew. During the year 1989, he initiated the formation of Ringo Starr and his all-star band, which consisted of a rotating lineup of accomplished musicians who would accompany him on performances all over the world. The high-energy performances of his all-star band, which featured a variety of songs by his bandmates, as well as Ringo's solo hits and Beatles classics, quickly made him a fan favorite. His all-star band was known for its high-energy performances. The idea was straightforward, but brilliant all at the same time. During the performance, every member of the band was given the opportunity to shine, resulting in a show that was not only collaborative, but also celebratory. In addition to his commercial success, Starr's drumming style garnered him widespread recognition and admiration from individuals all over the world. Ringo placed a greater emphasis on feel, groove, and musicality than the majority of drummers, who were more concerned with technical precision. It was not about playing flashy solos, rather, it was about serving the song, and his approach, which was both subtle and creative, inspired a great number of drummers to approach their craft in a manner that was more thoughtful and compositional of their approach. A number of his techniques, such as his use of matched grip, tuning his drums lower, and muffling tonal rings, became defining aspects of modern drumming. The fact that Starr considered his work on the Beatles' song Rain to be his best recorded drumming is a testament to the fact that he was both skilled and sensitive behind the kit. Ringo's contributions to the music industry were not overlooked by anyone. In 1999, he was inducted into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame, and in 2011, readers of Rolling Stone ranked him as the 5th greatest drummer of all time. This is a significant honor for someone who frequently minimized his own capabilities. As a member of the Beatles in 1988, Starr was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the first time. In 2015, he was inducted into the Hall as a solo artist, further solidifying his legacy as a truly iconic figure in the annals of music history. Additionally, Starr became one of the few artists to be inducted into the Hall of Fame twice. A knighthood was bestowed upon Starr by Queen Elizabeth II in 2018, transforming him into Sir Richard Starkey for his contributions to the field of music. This honor was the culmination of decades of remarkable accomplishments. Ringo maintained his modesty throughout his lengthy career, frequently stating that he was simply fortunate to have been a part of such a significant musical journey through his entire life. Nevertheless, his influence, charisma, and talent cannot be refuted, and his place in the annals of music history is unquestionable. Nevertheless, what was Ringo Starr's life like outside of the context of the studio and the stage? What were some of the ways that this legendary musician dealt with the ups and downs of fame? Keep up with us as we delve into the personal aspects of Ringo's extraordinary life, both personal and professional. Ringo Starr's personal life is just as fascinating as his rise to fame, the singer and songwriter. During the very same week that he joined the Beatles in 1962, he had his first encounter with Maureen Cox, a hairdresser. They tied the knot in February 1965, with Beatles manager Brian Epstein serving as the best man and George Harrison, along with Starr's stepfather Harry Graves, standing as witnesses. Their whirlwind romance led to their marriage. In order to capture the public's fascination with the couple, the Chiclets wrote a novelty song called "Treat Him Tender Maureen," which was inspired by the wedding. Zach was born on September 13, 1965, Jason was born on August 19, 1967, and Lee was born on November 11, 1965, 1965, 1970. Ringo and Maureen were married for a total of 3 years and had 3 children together. By 1971, Starr had acquired John Lennon's estate, which was located in Berkshire and was known as Tittenhurst Park. He then relocated his family into the expansive mansion. Ringo Starr's personal and professional life has been marked by triumphs and challenges. His first marriage to Maureen Starkey ended in 1975 due to infidelity, and she later passed away from leukemia in 1994. He found lasting love with actress Barbara Bach, whom he married in 1981. Over the years, Ringo built a legacy as a musician and family man, becoming the first Beatle to be a grandfather and later a great-grandfather. Despite his immense wealth, once ranked as the world's richest drummer, Ringo has remained grounded. He has sold properties, auctioned memorabilia for charity, and stayed vocal on political issues, including Brexit. In 2021, his name surfaced in the Pandora Papers, linking him to offshore accounts. However, he continues to promote a simple, peaceful lifestyle, embracing vegetarianism, daily meditation, and his signature motto, peace and love. Now at 84, Ringo has made a revelation that reshapes the narrative of the Beatles' breakup. He acknowledges that Yoko Ono played a far greater role than previously admitted. Her constant presence in the studio disrupted the band's dynamic, particularly during the recording of the White Album. Over time, John and Yoko's closeness created division, turning artistic disagreements into personal conflicts. Ringo recalls the tension as toxic and describes feeling marginalized. The stress led him to briefly leave the band, a moment that symbolized the deep fractures within the Beatles. His confession sheds light not only on Yoko's influence, but also on his own struggles with alcoholism during that period. Watching the friendships within the band dissolve left him with lasting emotional scars. His revelation raises new questions. Could Paul McCartney or past interviews from George Harrison add further insight? As Ringo reflects on the loss of both a band and a brotherhood, his story adds a deeply personal layer to the Beatles' complex history. It is possible that the complete picture is not yet complete because there are so many stories that have not been told about the breakup of the Beatles. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the perspectives of those who were closest to the band and uncover what actually occurred behind the scenes during those final days of the band's existence.